So let me take you now on a little journey. For those of you who don't know me, I'm very, very passionate about individual and organizational transformation. And I imagine that's a little bit why you are here with us too. And during the last 25 years or so, I've worked in a non-profit and startup and big global companies. And I've made it my very purpose to create better organizations. And I do feel there's still quite a lot that we can do. Whilst this so-called fourth industrial revolution is taking the world by its ears, organizations have collectively produced many outcomes that nobody really wanted. Now, there's hunger, there's inequality, there's burnout, diseases, fear, loneliness, and ecological collapse. And by some estimates, there's more than $7 trillion every year wasted globally because of employee disengagement. And if that wasn't enough, there's about 52% of Fortune 500 companies which have disappeared during the last 20 years. But there's also hope. Today, as Yogi Berra once maintained, our future ain't what it used to be. The winds of change have started blowing forcefully. And this current crisis is bonding us together, maybe more than ever before, and allows us to collectively reflect. And this is why I'm so pleased to be here with all of you today. And I thought rather than giving you polished slides with kind of total truth, I want to share with you a few reflections for my many, many pages of personal diary notes that I've made throughout the years, with pointers and considerations. Like these little small breadcrumbs through the miraculous forest of an arduous but exhilarating pilgrimage of learning, reflecting often on my own experiments, struggles, and lessons learned, and facing those powerful forces of the old structures, seeking to prevail over those feeble seeds of the new. And of course, from hundreds and hundreds of passionate meetings and discussions with esteemed colleagues on the ground all over the world. And I really wish these thoughts might provide you with a little bit of food for thought for your own journeys and allow us maybe together to join forces in reimagining our organizations and building back better. Let me take you on to this little journey together. And please, please bear in mind that this is truly MVP 1. And as we always say in Agile, if you look at your first MVP and you're not slightly embarrassed, you're not doing the right thing. So please be forgiving and do connect and add your thoughts afterwards or in the chat to make it better. But without further ado, let's head off together into the wonderful world of organizational change, like humble pilgrims towards 6 critical stations of reflection, as I call them, along our way. And these are values, strategy, people, structure, culture, and leadership. And before we even really get going, we are already at our first junction. As Simon Sinek always suggests, start with why. And I don't know about you, but I often find people who tell me they really want to become agile or want to become teal without ever asking why they really want that. And I think similarly, over the last 30 years, we've created a seductively materialistic and individualistic narrative in our Western societies, where self-interested growth and productivity have sometimes become ends in themselves. But free markets are not moral by themselves, and prices not necessarily measure value. So why are we really here? And whence are we really going? And these questions are both existential and fundamental because organizations are normative. We create organizations for a purpose, to achieve something together, which individually we could not achieve. And I think we live in a world where ever more people work very hard, but get lost in their own search for meaning. We have often succumbed to the hedonistic treadmill of money for money's sake, with people working ever longer hours to attain status and wealth, just to find out it doesn't make them happier. And as a result, the #1 source of depression by 2030 is going to be work-related stress. So I strongly, strongly believe that organizational purpose and meaning has to transcend a quest for profits and shareholder value alone. As Colin Meyer maintained at the WEF this year, the true purpose of organizations is to solve the planet's problems profitably. Businesses need to start serving a purpose that is broader than just revenue generation. And it's not really about dividing up the pie, it's about creating a bigger pie together. And not only as a question of marketing or charity, but as a matter of morality and justice. Moreover, in our world where traditional communities of churches and neighborhood have often been eroded, and where scientific management has filled gaps of meanings with the gospel of growth, and where work has become so central in our lives, I believe the private sector has to step up. As Immanuel Kant warned us a century ago, human beings must always be treated as an end in themselves, never as means, never as cogs in a machine. And I believe we need human-centric organizations to provide a place of meaning and community where people can grow and flourish. Hence, my own North Star in the quest for better organizations has always been the creation of greater value, attaining both collective purpose and individual growth profitably. And once we've decided which mountain to climb, so to speak, the question is, of course, how to do it. What strategy? We live today in an ever more complex world with constant change, where the days of 5-year forecasts are long gone. And as BCG suggests, you can see it on the slides, the companies that will win in the 2020s are those who can compete on learning. From that paradigm of scalable efficiency that has dominated our businesses since the Industrial Revolution, we need to transition to a new world of scalable learning and development, as John Hagel says, where people can make a difference and where organizations continuously adapt to achieve their purpose. From competitive to adaptive advantage, and from closed systems to more boundary-less ecosystems. That means we need to let go of the illusion that work can be predicted or planned in detail. I believe that today we're facing so much change and so continuous advances in technology and in data that, and shortening half-life of knowledge and greater interdependencies, that in order to attain organizational learning at scale, we need to understand the intricacies of organizational systems and how to enable them to continually sense new opportunities, experiment fast, and embed continuous collaborative growth into the very fabrics of developmental organizations. And not only learning within the structure, but also continuous adapting of the structure itself. And also, and the pandemic shows this, with increasing frequency of crises, I think we need to push our ability to balance adaptability and resilience. And finally, we must rethink the future of work. Some sources maintain that 65% of the future professions of people entering primary school today do not even yet exist. And this all will require changes in people, structures, and cultures. And in a human-centric organizations, I believe we always have to start with its very members, the individuals. This is our first true peak of reflection on this journey. It's about people. And I think from treating people like easily replaceable and exchangeable human assets or as resources to be controlled, we have to learn to cherish the uniqueness of our people and design our organizations to truly fulfill their basic needs. And throughout my career, I've experienced that very often on transformation programs. We focus on milestones and KPIs and Gantt charts, but the most important success factors are emotional. The desire for orientation and purpose, for self-esteem, belonging, autonomy, and the importance of organizational fairness are fundamental needs to unleash human energy. And therefore, I believe that in deliberately developmental organizations, we have to seek to enable individuals to become, first of all, self-aware of their own biases and needs and anxieties and defense and coping mechanisms to be able to progress their own development. Our inner game is our outer game. And only if we're able to assert our own selves do we have agency to fully contribute ideas and creativity in relation with others. He who looks outside dreams, he who peers inside awakens, is suggested. Still, I think scaling organizational learning remains very difficult, and I'm myself learning about it all the time, because it requires integrating action and inquiry in everything that we do to continuously explore whilst we are moving in cross-functional and cross-country peer communities of learning. It also always creates tension because by its very nature, total consensus would overwhelm complex systems. Hence, in order to generate collaborative innovation, we require what Bill Tobit calls liberating structures, principles and routines, rituals, methodologies to enable that generative dialogue supporting both single and double loop learning. And technology here is an enabler because it can support co-creation at ever greater scale. But as we always say in transformation, it's mostly 70-20-10. 70% people, 20% process, and 10% systems. And I'm always sorry to tell this to my friends in IT. But that said, we must establish both freedom and order in order to flourish and learn. And I think contrary to what some people think, agility doesn't mean chaos. It actually always balances autonomy and alignment. We earn autonomy by aligning ourselves. So the next question, I think, is how such agility can be supported by organizational structure, which is our fourth junction. And it's funny that in most transformations that I've been in, people always jump to writing up org charts immediately, dividing up the turf or moving the proverbial deck chairs on the Titanic. And I think the truth is that our world has become complex and cannot be resolved through bureaucracy anymore. You cannot just stand on the mountain and preach strategy down the hills to get positive execution. And our structures need to reflect and enable ruthless experimentation, collaboration, and tearing down those ivory towers and hierarchies in our minds so that knowledge and also power can flow freely. And I think we need to enable that continuous readjustment of structures as soon as they become obsolete. So I strongly believe that more and more traditional hierarchies will be replaced by more fluid and modular structures. We need those ambidextrous organizations that can enable exploitation of the existing and exploration of the new. And in ING, as Mihaly was saying, we were one of the first banks to roll out Agile at scale globally and beyond IT across all functions. And I think Agile organizations have provided more flexibility within the pyramid, enabling self-organization and cross-functional flows of information and decision-making. But it doesn't stop there. We are already seeing experiment with meshed networks of teams and market-oriented ecosystems, holacracy, sociocracy, and higher, the white goods manufacturer CEO Zhang claimed that the future will hold only two types of organizations, online platforms and those who rely on them. I'm convinced that organizational capability will become a critical success factor. In every transformation I've led, the inherent power of the existing structure, that clinging of individuals to hierarchical roles that often have become a very profound part of their identities has stifled change. And I think even more attention needs to be paid to distribution of decision-making and power. Self-generative systems will be stifled if positional power is imposed onto them. In the future, I hope many more people will be able to become their own CEO. And our organizations will become more boundaryless. However many smart people we've got inside our shop, there are many more smart people who we can connect from the outside. So I'm watching this space very, very closely. But I think most of us are kind of in transformation in HR, and we know that even more important than structure is, of course, the culture of our organization. And that's our next station of rest. Culture, I see a little bit like a field of energy that tinges and then influences every interaction and transaction in an organizational system. As Peter Drucker once said, we cannot motivate others. We can only create an environment for others to motivate themselves. And here I think this proverbial iceberg of the organization, its inner theater of underlying beliefs and values and assumptions, needs to be explored and aligned. And it is deeply emotional. Every system, even us on this call, cannot be fully understood just by our minds. It also needs comprehension by the heart. And being aware and understanding the underlying emotions and tensions and building that psychological safety and trust in an agile organization is just fundamental. And here my training in system psychodynamics has really sharpened my antennas immensely. And I found that there's anxiety in every single human system. And if we are not able to sense and manage these anxieties towards the purpose, it will surface in other ways. And those mostly will be not conducive to the system success. But if I want to say it simply, fear kills creativity. If people are happy, they don't just act smarter, they are smarter. That's what neuroscience is telling us. So reinforcing transparency and openness and trust and embracing failures can spark much higher energy. And unitedness around purpose can enable people to leave their individual fears and anxiety behind, to join in the community, bringing their whole authentic self. However, we need to remember that culture is a derivative property of a system. Whatever some consultants might claim, it can never be changed directly. It can be supported by structures and symbols, but it's primarily the results of how we behave and how we decide day after day. And any incongruency will drain energy. If you continue to praise those firefighting heroes, you will have more fires. And if you avoid conflict and radical candor, you will be ruined by empathy. So this is why I personally believe leadership is so fundamental for our journey towards learning organizations. Change must be leader-led. Leaders create culture with every move they make, with every word they say. And I believe organizational transformation always starts with the individual transformation of its leaders. It's like that forgotten SDG number 18, our final peak. And what people sometimes forget, I believe, is that in an agile system and with increasing complexity and urgency, leadership becomes more difficult. And business schools have for decades been training generations of managers and leaders in the seductive and simplistic logic of principal-agent theory. By that model, the leadership elite who has the power instructs those masses of workers who have little power what to do, deploying sticks and carrots as necessary to adjust their behaviors, and trusting, of course, that free market forces would right individual wrongs. But let me be very, very clear. In the learning organization of the future, such a model is simply unsustainable. In a world of self-organization, there is no place anymore for patriarchic commanders-in-chief who will narcissistically rule by positional power and dominance. Agile leaders, we always say, set destination, not direction. They set the why and not the how, as Steve Bungay describes in his wonderful book, The Art of Action. And decisions are always made at the lowest possible level, closest to the customer. So rather than telling people what to do, leaders today have to become experts in building and sensing and influencing human systems, both emotionally and rationally, in coaching individuals and teams, and in enabling the co-creation and emergence of a shared purpose. In an agile learning organization, the quality of relationships, of connections, must have the same importance as the quality of outcomes. And as John Quincy Adams once said, if your actions inspire others to dream more, to learn more, to do more, and to become more, you are a leader. Ben Zander, the chief conductor of the Boston Philharmonic Orchestra, once said in Denmark last year that by his measures, successful leadership is very easy to spot. It's about shiny eyes. And I feel that in such a new world where we need chief connectors who can create a more maternal holding environment for those liminal conversations, presencing the emerging future, and chief communicators who earn respect of their people by making personal sacrifices to progress the collective purpose. And Bill Torbert calls these new leaders alchemists, leaders who can access that almost magical mutual power of transformation. And such a new transpersonal leadership paradigm integrates the intellectual, the emotional, and the spiritual intelligence. Leaders need to truly understand how everything hangs together, including their own self, in a web of life, and lead beyond the ego, as John Knight writes. Allowing time for awareness and reflection rather than always jumping into action, letting go to become imperfectionists, hearing their soul knocking at the ego's door, so to speak. And I think for traditional leaders who have risen the corporate chain by being in control, this is a difficult challenge. What brought us here won't bring us there. Transformational leaders are not only born, as Manfred Kitz-Ries once said, they have to be reborn. And this is critical, as the maturity of an organization can never transcend the maturity and consciousness of its leaders. And eventually, in a truly developmental learning organization, leadership is not a set of traits or a top 3 this and top 5 that, and not even a role, but an interrelational process, collective energy inspired by common purpose and embedded throughout the organization. And for me personally, this part has probably been the most difficult, but also the most eye-opening part of this journey. So here we are, 6 stations of reflection. And having looked at all of this, we're finally returning home, so to speak, from a pilgrimage to search for better organizations, to the place from where we started. And if you're like me, you're beginning to see our organizations with slightly different eyes. I think with a growing understanding that organizations of the future require a new paradigm, from analyzing and optimizing organizations as soulless machines, we're starting to acknowledge organizations as living organisms with minds and hearts and souls, where individuals and communities experience and develop together, and where wonder and love have their place as much as science and efficiency, and where leaders are able to grasp all those colors of life's spiral dynamics and spark and integrate that energy and creativity and beauty that organizations can create, becoming themselves part of an interconnected evolutionary system. And where profit, rather than a solitary goal, becomes a dynamic feedback mechanism to nudge this evolutionary system towards its purpose. And here I want to pause together for a few seconds and just breathe and sense, to hold this image in reverence for a few seconds, trying to visualize being on that mountaintop where the sun slowly rises up, showing us all her colors, so that we may understand the depth of interconnectedness that is in all human life. Oscar Wilde once said, "A map of the world that does not include utopia is not really worth glancing at." Are we there yet? Certainly not. I'm not even certain Agile 1.0 has arrived in every boardroom. But does that mean we cannot or should not try to build such utopian organizations? I don't think so. On the contrary, I'm certain that if we collectively believe in the power of a new model, and if we are willing to become part of its evolution, it will arise like that sun over the hills. Our energy follows our attention like a torch. Wherever you as a leader put your attention on, that's where your energy goes. If you align your energy and your intention, you will become that true vessel of purpose, and transformation will commence. But of course, we will need a lot of help. And I had promised some reflections on HR. Of course, I could say that we should install agile routines and tribes and circles and COEs also in the HR function, and digitize HR process journeys and leverage data and analytics and support remote working. And don't get me wrong, all of that is true. And I have a few other ideas for you here on the slide. But even more than that, my plea today is for HR colleagues who are listening to stand firmly at our side in this crucial transformation. I was privileged to have worked with many outstanding HR leaders who have helped me on my own journey. Yet I've also watched with anguish during the last decades that we have sometimes forced HR functions to become entirely focused on transactional or administrative or auditing activities, depriving our HR colleagues of the very soul of their work. And we need you back with us as chief people or chief purpose or chief learning officers to join our movement towards better organizations. We need your help to battle those existing forces of inertia. We need you to speak truth to power and to fight for a different mental paradigm in organizations. And we need you as business partners, but also as dreamers, as architects, as engineers, and yes, as coaches and controllers wherever necessary. And collectively, I think we need to revise those sometimes anachronistic and counterproductive HR processes where they exist around recruitment or talent recognition, learning employees, which sometimes come into the way of evolution. If over 70% of employees are disengaged and our underlying systems are sometimes stuck in the industrial age, installing a few more meditation and yoga classes for the overstressed will not be enough. So please allow me one final reflection. I've learned over the course of my career that transformation is always extremely personal. Through this arduous journey, my relationships have become richer. I'm more at ease with myself. I've accepted fear and I've grown. But I also had to learn that true purpose is not only beautiful poetry, but also what we are personally willing to give up or to struggle and to suffer for. It's about how much we dare to hope and how far we decide to push ourselves beyond our personal comfort zone. And St. Augustine once said, hope has two beautiful daughters. Their names are anger and courage. Anger at the way things are, and courage to see that they do not remain as they are. And if you're already courageous but still feel comfortable, please make another step. As Mahatma Gandhi once said, we have to become the change that we want to see. And this very much concludes my presentations. I believe that future agile organizations will be more human-centric with higher purpose, competing on learning, enabling co-creation, and more adaptive and fluid structures with a fearless culture and transformational leaders. Of course, where exactly to land on these levers will depend on your context. Like people, companies are all very much unique. I was convinced already before the crisis that we had arrived at an existential moment and it was really urgent to act. But I think with this current pandemic, I believe the urgency is even greater. And the virus, I think, lays bare the frailty sometimes of our social contract, and the economic lockdowns shine a glaring light on existing inequalities and even create new ones. So I think today is a time where we have to occupy those front rows of our lives and make choices. Let us together show the spirit of pioneers and adventurers and stride forward on this quest to create better organizations for a better future. You may say I'm a dreamer, but I hope I'm not the only one. I really hope I've inspired some of you to pack your virtual backpacks and join us on this adventure. So finally, again, thank you to all of those who have stimulated my journey, and especially, again, a big thank you to Mihaly and the Hexa team who have created this moment for all of us to be here together. I'm much looking forward to seeing some of you at Mihaly's next HR Congress. And in the meantime, please do connect online and do take my thinking apart. Right? Let us together reimagine and renew our organizations and build back better for a more sustainable future. Because if not us, then who? And if not now, then when?